The Udo market didn't just catch fire, it exploded into a screaming nightmare of mud, ash, and magic. If you had told the great warriors of Udo that their doom would come on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, they would have laughed. If you told them it would come in the form of a giant slimy catfish wearing a traditional wrapper, they would have called you mad. But I promise you, nobody was laughing today. Warriors were flying through the air, swatted like annoying insects by the massive, wet tail of the beast. The catfish roared, a sound like grinding stones and choking mud, demanding to be fed as it tore the blacksmith's shop apart with its bare fins. Across the square, a girl made entirely of burning, dripping palm kernels floated above the yam stalls. Every time she laughed, sparks rained down, setting the thatched roofs ablaze. She pointed a blazing finger at the terrified crowd, her voice echoing like a crackling bonfire. "Where is my mother? Where is Nwafo? Come and embrace your daughter." Hidden behind a shattered pottery stall, Nwafo clamped her trembling hands over her ears, choking on the thick black smoke. Beside her, Adaeze, her bitterest rival, was frozen in pure terror, staring at the giant catfish that was currently chewing on a wooden cart. Chief Eze, the village leader, was running through the chaos, desperately trying to curb and contain his panics, but it was useless. There was no precedence for this kind of destruction in the history of the kingdom. Nwafo grabbed Adaeze by the collar of her wrapper, her eyes wide with fury and tears. "This is your fault. You whispered that thing into existence, Adaeze. You brought this curse on us." "Me? Look at the fire girl burning down the shrine. That is your lie, Nwafo. You birthed that flaming demon from your own jealous mouth." Before they could tear each other apart, the giant catfish turned its massive whiskered head. Its dead milky eyes locked right onto the stall where the two women were hiding. It raised a massive finned arm, casting a huge, terrifying shadow over them. It was preparing to smash them into the earth. "Hold on. Before the hammer falls on our two rivals, and before this beast flattens them into the Udo dust, you need to see exactly how two ordinary village women accidentally summoned an army of monsters with just a few whispers. If you want to survive this chaos and see who makes it out alive, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a like on the video and comment Udo down below to join the village. You do not want to miss what happens next. Exactly 24 hours earlier, the market was peaceful. The only heat was coming from the blazing sun and the bitter, suffocating tension between Nwafo and Adaeze. They didn't just dislike each other, they were at war, and it all started over a man. Years ago, Obinna, a man with hands that could make wood sing and eyes that held the deep calm of the river, courted them both. But he chose Nwafo. Adaeze quickly married a wealthy merchant to save face, but her heart had turned to poison. She paraded her wealth every chance she got, while Nwafo, despite winning the man she loved, was constantly tormented by jealousy, watching Adaeze wear coral beads while she and Obinna struggled to eat. Yesterday afternoon, that poison finally boiled over. Adaeze was strutting past Nwafo's stall, her expensive silk wrapper dragging in the dirt. She purposefully kicked a cloud of red dust right onto Nwafo's freshly washed yams. Nwafo leaped to her feet, slapping the dust off her goods. "Watch your heavy feet, Adaeze, or are they too weighed down by the misery of your empty marriage? Everyone knew you didn't cross that line." Adaeze stopped dead in her tracks. She slowly spun around, a cruel, razor-sharp smile stretching across her face. She didn't yell. Instead, she stepped right up to Nwafo's stall, leaning in close so the gathering crowd could hear every single venomous word. "My marriage? At least I have a real husband, Nwafo, not a poor carver who spends his nights crying in his sleep because he wishes he had chosen me instead of a bitter, barren woman." The crowd gasped. That was a heavy blow. Nwafo's chest heaved. She saw red. She didn't just want to insult Adaeze anymore. She wanted to destroy her entirely. Nwafo leaned over the yams, her voice dripping with sheer, unadulterated malice. "You talk so proudly of your wealthy husband, Adaeze, but we all know the truth. He is never home because he is not a man at all. Your husband is a giant, slimy river catfish disguised in human clothes, crawling back to the mud every single night to sleep with the fishes." The market women covered their mouths in shock, but their eyes sparkled with the dangerous thrill of the gossip. It was a ridiculous lie, an absurd insult, but in the heat of the moment, it felt like a knife twisting in Adaeze's pride. Trembling with rage, Adaeze pointed a finger right between Nwafo's eyes, firing back her own devastating, impossible lie. Is that so? Well, at least I am not hiding witchcraft in my house. Everyone knows your so-called pregnancy last year was a sham. You couldn't give Obinna a real child, so you went into the evil forest and carved a daughter out of glowing palm kernels and dark magic. They stood chest to chest, panting, eyes locked in pure hatred. But what they didn't notice, what none of the gossiping villagers noticed, was that the wind in Udo had completely stopped blowing. The leaves on the baobab trees froze. The dust in the air hung suspended. For generations, the village elders had warned that the wind of Udo was a living, breathing spirit, a spirit that fed on spoken words. But the people had forgotten. We, the audience, could see what the blind, angry villagers could not. The wind physically wrapped around Nwafo and Adaeze's mouths. It snatched the vicious syllables right out of the air. The wind glowed a sickly pale green as it swirled up from the market dust, twisting and writhing like a snake. It carried the whispers away, whistling into the dark, forbidden depths of the forest. There, in the damp mud and the shadows, the wind began to incubate the hatred. It wove the lies into physical form. Leaves, mud, and dark magic fused together, feeding on the jealousy of the two women. By the time the sun set, the ground deep in the forest began to shake. By midnight, the trees began to burn, and by the time the sun rose the next day, the lies had grown legs. And now, back in the burning market, the giant catfish's massive fist was coming down fast to crush Nwafo and Adaeze. Suddenly, a figure leaped from the smoke. It was Obinna, Nwafo's husband. He swung his heavy, iron-carving axe with all his might, burying it deep into the monster's slimy forearm. The beast let out an ear-piercing roar, staggering backward and shaking the earth. Obinna grabbed Nwafo and Adaeze by their wrappers, violently yanking them out of the rubble just a fraction of a second before the monster's fist pulverized the stall into dust. "Run! Do not look back! The whole village is under attack! Will Obinna's bravery be enough? Or will the monsters tear him apart for interfering? Make sure you've smashed that like button, because we are running straight into the heart of the battle." Obinna didn't just drag his wife and her rival away from a monster, he dragged them straight into the apocalypse. As the three of them skidded into the center of the Udo village square, Nwafo and Adaeze froze in absolute horror. The giant catfish and the burning fire girl were no longer the only nightmares in Udo. The curse had spread. Every single lie, every malicious rumor, and every piece of dirty gossip ever whispered in the dark corners of the village had taken horrifying physical form. The square was a war zone of hypocrisy. Get behind the council tree. Do not let them see you move. They dove behind the massive roots of the ancient tree, watching their home tear itself apart. To their left, Chief Eze, the proud, arrogant leader of the village, who always walked with his chest puffed out, was sprinting for his life. He was screaming like a child, dropping his coral beads as he ran. Chasing right on his heels was a terrifying, 10-foot-tall abomination. It was a monster made entirely of rotting debt cowries, stolen gold, and decaying royal fabrics. This was the physical manifestation of the chief's secret embezzlement. For years he had lied to the village, claiming the treasury was empty while he secretly built mansions in neighboring towns. Now, his stolen wealth had formed a beast that wanted to eat him alive. "Help me! Guards! Someone kill this thing! I am your chief!" But the guards couldn't help him. When a brave warrior swung a machete at the dead monster, the blade hit the cowrie shells and shattered into a dozen pieces. The monster simply laughed, a chilling sound that echoed with the cries of the starving villagers the chief had stolen from. It reached out a massive golden hand, swatting the warrior into a mud wall. Down the dusty path, things were even more frantic. Chike, the most handsome and arrogant young warrior in Udo, was fighting a desperate battle in the air. He was surrounded by a thick, black cloud of metallic, buzzing locusts. Their wings were like razor blades, slicing through his leather armor. These were the physical forms of the false promises of love he had whispered to half the maidens in the village. Every sweet, empty lie he had ever told in the moonlight was now a mechanical insect trying to tear the flesh from his bones. Get away from me. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean any of it. Suddenly Amara, the fiercest maiden in the village, and the only girl Chike actually cared about, leaped into the fray. She didn't have a shield. She didn't have armor. She just had a rusty farming machete and a heart full of rage. She started slicing the locusts out of the air, standing back to back with the man who had lied to her. I knew you were lying to me, Chike. I knew you were sneaking into Obioma's hut. But I am still out here fighting for you, you foolish man. I swear, Amara, I lied to them. I didn't lie to you. You are the only one I actually meant it for. If we survive this, I am going to kill you myself. It was absolute madness. The warriors were failing. You cannot kill a rumor with a spear. When they struck the monsters, the beasts didn't bleed. They simply multiplied, or reformed from the mud and the smoke. The village was drowning in its own deceit. Nwafo, watching from behind the tree roots, buried her face in Obina's chest. Adaeze sat beside them, her expensive wrapper torn and covered in soot, her eyes wide with the realization that their petty argument had doomed everyone they loved. And then, the sun died. Right in the middle of the afternoon, the bright yellow sun turned a sickly, deep blood red. The sky bruised purple and black. The wind completely died. The monsters suddenly stopped attacking. The giant catfish froze mid-step. The burning fire girl stopped laughing. The dead monster dropped Chief Eze to the ground. Total, suffocating silence fell over the screaming village. The only sound was the crackle of the burning market stalls. From the thick black smoke rising from the destroyed village shrine, a figure emerged. It was the chief priestess of Udo. She did not run. She did not cower. She walked with a terrifying, slow grace. She wore no armor, only a white wrapper and chalk painted across her eyes. She walked right past the giant catfish, and to the absolute shock of the villagers, the massive, mindless beast actually shrank back in fear, lowering its head to the dirt. The priestess stepped into the very center of the square. She raised her ancient wooden staff, carved from the first tree ever planted in Udo, and slammed it into the earth. The shockwave knocked every warrior to their knees. Obina, Nwafo, and Adaeze were pushed flat against the dirt. Fools! Blind, arrogant fools! You have fed the wind your poison, and now the wind has vomited your poison back onto your doorsteps. Did you think the gods were deaf? She pointed her staff at the bleeding red sun hanging in the sky. You cannot kill a lie with a machete. You cannot outrun a rumor. These beasts are born of your own tongues. And look at the sky. You have until the red sun touches the horizon. If these monsters are not unmade by dusk, they will merge into the Goliath of deceit, and the village of Udo will be wiped from the face of the earth, swallowed by the earth forever. Chief Eze, trembling in the mud at the feet of his dead monster, clasped his hands together, weeping like a newborn. How, priestess? How do we unmake them? My swords do nothing. Tell us, I beg you. The priestess looked down at the chief with burning, unforgiving eyes. A lie is born in the dark, chief. It dies in the light. The only weapon against deceit is the humiliating, absolute truth. You must scream your darkest secrets for the wind to hear. Only the truth can turn these beasts to ash. The village went dead silent, confessed their secrets, screamed their deepest shames for everyone to hear. It meant ruining their lives, destroying their marriages, shattering their reputations forever. But the red sun was sinking fast. The monsters were beginning to stir again, their eyes glowing with hunger. The clock is ticking! The sun is sinking fast! Will the proud, stubborn villagers of Udo swallow their pride to save their lives, or will their secrets bury them all? Drop a comment with the word truth down below if you think they can do it, and make sure your notifications are turned on, because the greatest confession war in history is about to begin. The chief priestess's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Scream your darkest secrets or die. For 10 agonizing seconds, nobody moved. The proud people of Udo looked at each other in sheer terror. Confess? To scream their hidden shames, their stolen goods, their secret affairs in the middle of the village square? It would ruin their lives. It would destroy marriages. It would shatter reputations forever. They would rather die. But the red sun did not care about their pride. It sank an inch lower. The monsters woke up. Their eyes glowed with a terrifying new hunger, realizing their prey was out of time. The 10-foot-tall monster made of dead cowries grabbed Chief Eze by his royal beads and hoisted him high into the air. The beast opened its massive hollow chest, preparing to swallow the chief whole. Chief Eze looked down into the abyss of the monster's throat. His royal pride shattered like cheap pottery. He squeezed his eyes shut, kicked his legs wildly, and screamed at the very top of his lungs. "I stole the treasury! I didn't build the new bridge. I bought my third wife with the village's emergency funds. I am a fraud. I am a miserable, greedy fraud." Instantly, the dead monster froze. It let out a high-pitched, agonizing shriek that shook the trees. Before everyone's eyes, the massive beast dissolved. The rotting cowries lost their magic, turning into harmless hollow shells that rained down over the market. Chief Eze plummeted into the mud, weeping like a baby, his reputation absolutely ruined, but his life saved. The village stared in shock. The priestess was right. The truth was a weapon. And suddenly, absolute frantic pandemonium erupted. It was no longer a battle of swords. It was a war of confessions. The proud villagers of Udo began running for their lives, while screaming their most shameful secrets to the heavens. It was madness. It was hilarious. It was pathetic. A wealthy farmer, cornered by a beast made of thorny vines, dropped his machete and fell to his knees. "I burned the yam harvest. It wasn't the sun. I was too lazy to water them, so I burned them and blamed the gods." Poof! The thorn monster exploded into a cloud of harmless dust. Across the square, a woman was being chased by a shadow demon shaped like a wild hound. "I poisoned the elder's dog. It wouldn't stop barking at my goats. I am sorry. I am so sorry." Flash! The shadow demon evaporated into thin air. And what about Chike? The handsome, arrogant warrior was still fighting a losing battle against his swarm of metallic, buzzing locusts, the physical form of his fake promises to the village girls. He was bleeding, exhausted, and Amara was still fighting back to back with him. A massive locust lunged for Amara's face. Chike threw his spear, pinning it to the dirt, but 5 more took its place. He grabbed Amara by the shoulders, looking her dead in the eyes over the buzzing chaos. "I don't just love you, Amara. I lied to the others because I was broke. I was too poor to pay your bride price. I am not a wealthy warrior. I lied to all those girls so they would feed me free meals while I secretly saved up money to marry you." The entire swarm of razor-sharp locusts instantly stopped buzzing. They shattered like fragile glass, raining down on them as completely harmless, sparkling sand. Amara stood there, her chest heaving, her machete trembling in her hand. She stared at Chike. She didn't know whether to slap him into the next life or kiss him. So, with a furious scream, she grabbed his face and kissed him fiercely, right there in the falling ash. But the war was not over. While the smaller lies were turning to dust, the 2 original nightmares, the ones born from the deepest, most venomous hatred, were still alive. The sun was a mere sliver on the horizon. The sky was bleeding into darkness. The giant catfish and the blazing fire girl had merged their attacks. They were advancing on the council tree. Nuafo, Adaeze, and Obina were trapped. There was nowhere left to run. The heat from the fire girl was blistering, melting the bark off the ancient tree. The stench of the catfish was suffocating. Obina stepped in front of the 2 women. His iron axe was chipped. His arms were covered in soot and blood. He knew his weapon couldn't kill a lie, but he was a man of Udo, and he would not let these demons take his wife. Norfo, Adaeze, if you have truths to speak, speak them now. I cannot hold them back. Nuafo grabbed her husband's arm, terrified to lose him. She spun around and looked at Adaeze. Adaeze was backed against the roots of the tree, paralyzed by the sight of the catfish raising its massive, slimy fist. "Adaeze, tell the truth. Tell it now or we all die. Confess." Adaeze closed her eyes. The proud, wealthy, arrogant woman who had paraded her coral beads and her silk wrappers for years finally broke. The tears carved clean lines through the black soot on her face. She took a deep, agonizing breath, and she screamed her truth to the sky. "My husband is not a fish. He is a human being, but he does not love me. He only married me for my father's trade connections. I sleep in a mansion filled with gold, but I have not felt the touch of a man who truly loves me in 10 years. I am desperately, hopelessly lonely every single day of my life. The giant catfish stopped mid-strike. It let out a pathetic, croaking gasp. Its massive body shuddered violently. And then, with a deafening crash, the beast exploded into a massive tidal wave of muddy river water. The water washed over the square, soaking the earth, putting out the fires on the market stalls. Adaize collapsed into the mud, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The wealthy queen of Udo was stripped bare, her painful reality exposed to the world. But the heat was still there. The fire girl remained. The water had not touched her. The sun touched the absolute edge of the horizon. Dusk was seconds away. The fire girl raised her burning, glowing hands. She didn't aim for Nwafo. She aimed directly at Obina's chest, preparing to incinerate him. No! Nwafo threw herself in front of her husband. She looked at the blazing monster she had invented. She looked at the wealthy Adaize, sobbing in the mud. For a decade, Nwafo had told the village, and herself, that she was the victor. She had won the man. She was the secure, happy wife. But it was a lie, and it was time to unmake it. I didn't carve you out of kernels. You are a lie. You are nothing but my own insecurity. Because the truth is I am terrified. I am terrified every single day that Obina made the wrong choice. The entire square was silent. Everyone was listening. Nwafo turned to look Obina directly in the eyes. The truth is, I look at Adaize's wealth, and I look at our poverty, and I think you regret choosing me. I am so deeply insecure, I am so afraid that I am not enough for you, that I poison my own marriage with jealousy because I do not feel worthy of your love. The fire girl froze. Her burning hands stopped inches from Nwafo's face. For a single, agonizing second, the blazing monster looked down at its creator. The angry, burning expression on the demon's face melted into something that almost looked like sadness. And then, the sun slipped below the horizon. With a brilliant, silent flash of golden light, the fire girl didn't explode. She simply broke apart. Her burning body separated into a million glowing golden fireflies. They drifted gently over the soaked, ruined market, floating harmlessly up into the dark night sky, like stars returning to the heavens. Silence fell over Udo. The monsters were gone. The village was saved. But as the villagers slowly stood up from the mud, looking at each other in the twilight, they realized something terrifying. The physical monsters were gone, but the truth was out. Every secret, every hidden resentment, every fake friendship, and every quiet desperation was now entirely out in the open. The real fallout was just beginning. Wow, what a massive emotional climax. The monsters are defeated, but the village of Udo will never, ever be the same. Do not click away. You absolutely need to see how Obina reacts to Nwafo's confession, and what happens to the disgraced chief. Hit that like button to wipe the sweat from your forehead, and let's dive into the final act. In the center of the ruined market square, Nwafo stood frozen. Her clothes were scorched. Her face was streaked with soot and tears, and her heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had bared her soul to the entire village. She had confessed her deepest, darkest insecurity, that she believed she was unworthy of her husband's love. She couldn't look him in the eye. She stared down at her muddy feet, bracing herself for pity, for judgment, or worse, for silence. Obina slowly lowered his chipped iron axe. The exhaustion of the battle weighed heavily on his shoulders, but his eyes were clear. He didn't run away. He didn't turn his back. Instead, he dropped the axe into the mud, took 2 slow steps forward, and knelt right in front of his wife. "Look at me, Nwafo." Slowly, trembling, Nwafo raised her head. "You carried that poison in your heart for 10 years, fighting a ghost that never existed. You thought I stayed out of obligation. You thought I looked at what others had, and regretted my choice." A tear slipped down Obina's face, cutting a clean path through the dirt on his cheek. "I chose you when we had nothing, Nwafo, and I would choose you 1,000 times over if the world ended tomorrow. There is no Adaize in my heart. There never was. There is only you." Nwafo broke down completely. All the walls she had built, all the venomous jealousy she had nursed for a decade, shattered into pieces. She threw her arms around Obina's neck, burying her face in his shoulder, weeping with the purest relief a human soul could ever know. The heavy weight was gone. The air in her lungs felt clean for the first time in her life. Across the ruined square, Leaning against the roots of the ancient council tree sat Adaeze. She was completely alone in the mud, her expensive silk wrapper ruined, her hair disheveled. The proud queen of Udo had been laid bare. Everyone knew her marriage was an empty shell built on trade and convenience. Everyone knew she was profoundly, agonizingly lonely. For a moment, the old Adaeze would have let the shame consume her. She would have curled up and died of pride. Instead, she slowly lifted her head. She looked across the square and saw Nwafo wrapped safely in Obina's arms. A strange, quiet transformation happened in Adaeze's eyes. The bitter, toxic rivalry that had poisoned her soul for 10 years simply evaporated. She wasn't angry anymore. She was just tired of pretending. Adaeze used her hands to push herself up out of the mud. She didn't try to hide her face. She smoothed down her ruined wrapper with dignity, turned her back on the wreckage of her old life, and walked quietly away into the night. Not as a wealthy fraud hiding behind gold, but as a real woman ready to figure out who she actually was. And what of Chief Eze? The proud leader of Udo was stripped of his title before the night even ended. The village elders, shocked by his tearful confession of embezzlement, formally removed his coral beads. He sat on a low wooden stool outside his compound, stripped of his wealth, his stolen gold sitting in piles of useless cowrie shells in the dirt. He had lost his power, but as he looked at his hands, free of the crushing burden of his lies, he let out a long, shuddering breath. For the first time in his life, he was an honest man, even if he was a poor one. The village of Udo rebuilt their market. In the months that followed, the grass grew back green over the ash, and new, stronger stalls were built where the monsters had torn the earth apart. But Udo was never the same again. The people learned a lesson written in blood and fire. They learned that words are not mere breath to be thrown away into the wind. Words carry the weight of creation. They have the power to build palaces of joy, or to conjure nightmares that will hunt you down in broad daylight. The elders carved a new law into the trunk of the great council tree, a law that every child in Udo grew up reciting. A lie whispered in the dark will always grow legs and walk into the marketplace in broad daylight. You cannot hide behind your pride, and you cannot outrun your secrets. Truth is a heavy, painful medicine. It burns the throat as it goes down, and it strips away the comfortable illusions we wrap ourselves in. But it is the only medicine strong enough to heal a broken heart, and the only weapon powerful enough to destroy the monsters we create with our own mouths. What an incredible, unforgettable journey. From the fiery chaos of the market to the raw, emotional redemption in the ash, the story of Udo teaches us a lesson we should all carry in our hearts. If this epic tale kept you glued to the screen for every single minute, do not leave without showing your support. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss another deep, immersive African folktale. Smash the like button to help the channel grow, and let me know down in the comments, what is the biggest truth you've ever had to tell? Thank you for watching, family. Until our next epic story, keep your words true and your heart clean. Goodbye.